I had a bad feeling about my own home the morning I found my tackle box moved. That probably sounds small. A tackle box. But I'd kept that green Plano case in the same corner of the garage shelf for 11 years, ever since my wife passed and I stopped fishing as often as we used to go together. It sat on the third shelf, left side, handle facing out. That morning it faced the wall. I stood there in my garage in the South Carolina humidity, coffee going cold in my hand, staring at a tackle box like it had said something insulting to me. I'm 63 years old. I spent 28 years as a homicide detective in Greenville before my knees and my doctor together convinced me to retire. I know what a disturbed space looks like. I know the difference between I moved that and forgot, and someone else moved that. And standing in my own garage that Tuesday morning in April, I knew someone had been going through my things. I didn't say anything at breakfast. My daughter was at the stove making eggs the way she'd started doing every morning since she and her husband had moved in 3 months ago. After the financial situation, as she called it, the one neither of them ever explained fully. I'd offered them the 2 spare rooms without hesitation. She was my only child. Her husband was quiet, polite, helped with the yard. I had no reason to think anything was wrong, but the tackle box faced the wall. I ate my eggs. I said the eggs were good. I watched my son-in-law read something on his phone with his thumb moving too slowly, the way people do when they're not actually reading but need to look occupied. I watched my daughter refill my coffee without being asked, which she'd never done before in her life, and smile at me with the particular warmth of someone who wants you to feel comfortable. I'm a detective. I notice things. I'd been noticing things for weeks and dismissing them, because she was my daughter and I loved her, and love makes you want to explain things away. That morning I stopped explaining. 2 days later I told them I was driving up to my buddy Harlan's place in the mountains. He has a cabin outside Brevard. We go up there every spring to fish the Davidson River, had done it for 15 years. I said I'd be gone a week, maybe 10 days if the trout were running well. My daughter hugged me. My son-in-law shook my hand and said, "Have a good one, sir," the way he always did, but his eyes went somewhere else for just a second, just a flicker. I drove north on 26 for 40 minutes. Then I turned around. I know a woman named Suzette who rents the small house at the end of Clover Fork Road, about half a mile from my property. We've been casual friends for years. She grew up next door to my late wife's family, came to the funeral, sends me a Christmas card every year with her cat on it. I called her from a gas station payphone. Yes, those still exist in certain parts of South Carolina, and asked if I could use her back porch for a few evenings. I told her I had a family situation. She didn't ask questions. She said, "I'll leave the gate unlocked." From Suzette's back porch, through a gap in the tree line, I had a partial view of my own property. Not great. Enough. The first evening I saw nothing unusual. Lights on in the living room, my daughter's car in the drive, television glow through the curtains. Normal. The second evening, a truck I didn't recognize pulled in around 7. Stayed for an hour and 15 minutes. I couldn't see the plates clearly. I wrote down the color, make, approximate year in the small notepad I'd started keeping in my shirt pocket. The third evening, Suzette came out onto the porch with 2 mugs of chamomile tea and sat down beside me without any invitation or announcement, like she'd been planning to join me all along. "Gray F-150, she said. "Crew cab. South Carolina plates, county sticker for Anderson." I looked at her. "I've been watching it too," she said. "It's been coming 3 evenings this week, before you called me." I asked her why she'd been watching. She wrapped both hands around her mug. The porch light caught the lines in her face, the particular tiredness of someone carrying something they haven't put down in a long time. "My first husband cleaned out our joint account the week before he filed," she said. "I had 2 days warning, and I didn't take it because I didn't want to believe it. I'm 71 years old and I still think about those 2 days." We sat in the dark for a while. "What do you think they're doing in there?" she asked. "Building a case," I said. She nodded slowly. "What kind?" "The kind that ends with someone signing documents they don't remember signing." She looked at me then. "You think your own daughter?" "I think someone has been going through my files. My safe had fresh scratches on it 2 weeks ago. My property deed folder was in the wrong place. My insurance policies had been moved." I set my mug down. "I think my son-in-law found out what I'm worth, and I think somewhere along the way he brought my daughter into it, or she brought herself." Suzette was quiet for a long moment. How much are you worth? It's a question most people wouldn't ask out loud. I appreciated that she did. The house and land, about 400,000 in this market. Life insurance, another $250,000. Retirement accounts. The timber rights on the back 40 that my father left me. I paused. Enough, enough, she repeated. The F-150 came back the following Tuesday. This time Suzette had a pair of binoculars she'd borrowed from her view, and I had a camera with a decent zoom lens that I'd picked up at a pawn shop in Spartanburg. We watched a man climb out of the truck. He was in his late 40s, heavyset, wore a polo shirt tucked into khakis. He carried a soft-sided briefcase. My son-in-law met him at the door. They were inside for 2 hours. Suzette wrote down the time, the duration, a description of the man in her neat, cramped handwriting. She kept a separate notebook from mine. I hadn't asked her to. She'd simply started one. You were a detective, she said as we watched the man drive away. 28 years. So you know what to do next. I know exactly what to do next. What I did next was wait 2 more days, until Wednesday morning, when my daughter drove to her aqua fitness class at the YMCA. She went every Wednesday at 9, had since they moved in, and my son-in-law left at 8:40 to wherever he went on weekday mornings. I watched from the tree line with Suzette's binoculars until both vehicles were out of sight. I gave it 20 more minutes. Then I drove to my own house, parked in my own driveway, unlocked my own front door. The guest room had been converted into a workspace. Laptop, printer, stacks of paper, 2 boxes on the floor that I recognized. They'd come from my study closet. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my mother-in-law's room the 3 times she came to visit, and I looked at what my son-in-law had turned it into, and I felt something cold and very specific settle in my chest. I opened the boxes first. My financial records, tax returns going back 8 years, insurance policy documents, bank statements, and underneath those, in a manila envelope with my handwriting on it, an envelope I'd last held 6 years ago when I changed my will after the funeral, the copy of my will. It had been opened and resealed. Not well. I photographed everything with my phone before I touched it. Then I went through it carefully. The will had been flagged on 3 pages with small adhesive tabs, the kind you get in an office supply store. Someone had been reading it with purpose, marking specific sections. Beneficiary designations, the property clause, the timber rights. I replaced everything exactly. Exact angle, exact position. Then I went to the desk. His laptop was closed and I wasn't going to open it. That was a line I didn't need to cross, given what I already had. But beside it was a yellow legal pad. Most of the pages were blank. The top page had been torn off, but I could see impressions in the page beneath. I took the pad to the window where the light was better, shielded and pressed a pencil lightly over the surface, an old trick. The impressions resolved into a name I didn't recognize and a phone number. Below that, 2 words, POA, confirmed. Power of attorney, confirmed. My hands didn't shake. I've held worse things in evidence bags, but I stood at that window for a full minute before I was ready to move. I photographed the impressions on the legal pad. I put the pad back. I walked through the rest of the house slowly, the way I used to walk crime scenes, not rushing, not reacting, just observing and cataloging. In the kitchen junk drawer where I kept takeout menus and spare keys, 2 keys were missing. The spare to the storage unit where I kept important documents in a fireproof lockbox. The spare to my safe in the study closet. They'd had copies made. I left through the back door, went back through the tree line, drove to Suzette's. She was waiting on the porch. POA, I said, and showed her the photograph. She looked at it for a long time. Power of attorney. They're planning to claim I authorized someone to act on my behalf. Property transactions. Probably medical decisions, too. I sat down in the porch chair that had become mine over the past week. There's no signature yet. They haven't moved that far, but they're close. Suzette handed me a glass of sweet tea without being asked. What's your next move? I need to see who that name on the pad is, and I need to know how far the plan goes. The name on the pad turned out to belong to a notary in Anderson who specialized in estate documents. I found him in 20 minutes on my phone. Public record, licensed by the state. I called his office from a number he wouldn't recognize. Asked about estate planning consultations for a senior family member. The receptionist was helpful. She mentioned they'd had several families come in recently for exactly that situation. I thanked her and hung up. That evening, I called my attorney. 50 years old, sharp, handles property law across 3 counties. I've known him since he was a junior partner arguing in front of a district judge I happened to be testifying before. I told him what I had. He was quiet on the phone for longer than attorneys usually are. "You need to do 3 things," he said, "and you need to do them before they execute whatever they're planning." The first thing was a notarized affidavit stating clearly that I had never executed any power of attorney, never authorized any third party to conduct transactions on my behalf regarding my property or finances, and that my mental faculties were fully intact, supported by a recent physical examination report, which I made an appointment for the following morning. The second thing was a call to my bank. I've had my accounts at the same institution for 31 years. The branch manager knows my face. I went in person, sat in his office, and explained the situation. He placed a flag on my accounts requiring in-person identity verification for any changes. He did it in 11 minutes and looked angry the whole time. The third thing was the trust. My attorney drafted it in 2 days, an irrevocable living trust, placing my property, the timber rights, and my financial assets under a structure that required my direct authorization for any transaction. It was filed with the county recorder on a Friday afternoon. The property I'd built over 6 decades could not be sold, transferred, or encumbered without me physically present. Whatever document they were planning to forge was now worthless before the ink dried. I drove back to my house on a Sunday, 8 days after I'd left for Brevard. I pulled into my driveway at 2 in the afternoon and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the house. My wife had picked the blue shutters. We'd argued about them. I thought they were too bright. She said a house needed personality. 22 years later, and I still think she was right about that. I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat and walked to the door. "You're back early." My daughter appeared from the kitchen. Her face went through 3 things in about a second: surprise, calculation, then warmth. She gave me a hug. "Is everything okay? How was the fishing?" "River was low," I said. "Figured I'd be more comfortable in my own bed." My son-in-law came downstairs. "Good to have you back, sir." His smile was good. I'd give him that. We had dinner together that evening. My daughter made pot roast the way I'd always liked it, with the carrots soft and the potatoes browned. She poured me a glass of the good bourbon without asking. It was all very warm. I let myself feel the sadness of it. This woman I'd raised, sitting across from me, feeding me a meal while something ran underneath the table that neither of us would name yet. 3 days later, my son-in-law sat down next to me while I was reading on the back porch. "I've been a little worried about you," he said. "Little things. Last week you couldn't remember where you'd put the spare truck key." I looked up from my book. "Is that right?" "My daughter mentioned it too." He said it carefully. "My daughter. Not your daughter, his. It's nothing serious, I'm sure, but maybe worth mentioning to your doctor. At your age, a little cognitive screening is just routine, right?" I set the book down on my knee and looked at him for a long moment. He was good at this. Patient, reasonable, the kind of delivery that sounds like concern right up until you understand what it's actually building. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. I went inside and opened the voice memo app on my phone. Over the next 4 days, I collected 11 recordings. Conversations at the dinner table, comments in the kitchen, a phone call my son-in-law made in the driveway that he didn't know I could hear from the study window. The word confused appeared 7 times across those recordings. The phrase "he doesn't always remember" appeared twice. In the driveway call, he said to whoever was on the other end, "We need to move up the timeline. He's back and he's more alert than I expected." More alert than expected. I sat with that for a while. On the Thursday of the following week, a second vehicle I didn't recognize came to the house while I was supposedly napping. The heavy man from the F-150. I watched from behind my bedroom curtain as my son-in-law walked him into the study. My study. They were in there for 40 minutes. I stood in the hallway outside the door and listened. My old detective's habit, standing very still, breathing very slowly. I heard my name. I heard the phrase "senior moment." I heard my son-in-law say, "He won't contest it, and if he does, we have documentation of the decline." I went back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed and thought about what I was going to do. Then I called my attorney. "How soon can you be at a real estate closing?" I asked. "Whenever you need me. They're planning to use a forged POA on a property transaction. I'll give you the timeline when I have it. I need you there when it happens." "I'll clear my schedule," he said. I had one more thing to do before the end. A week after I'd returned from my fake fishing trip, I went through the guest room workspace again, this time alone, while they were both out. I found what I was looking for in the bottom of the second box, a manila folder containing a power of attorney document bearing my signature. I looked at the signature for a long time. It was good work. Someone had studied my handwriting carefully, matched the slant, the weight. But my surname has an unusual capital at the start, a habit from a penmanship teacher in the 4th grade who insisted on a particular form, and this forgery lifted off the paper at the wrong angle. The loop was too open. I'd have caught it in 30 seconds on the witness stand. I photographed it front and back. I replaced it in the folder. I left the room exactly as I'd found it. The closing was scheduled for the second Friday in May at a title company in downtown Greenville. I found the appointment confirmation in a printed email tucked into the folder. They hadn't bothered to hide it with any particular care. The buyer was listed as an LLC from Atlanta. Cash transaction. Sale price, $380,000. They'd undervalued my property. That bothered me in a way I hadn't expected. I was in the parking lot of the title company at 1:45 in the afternoon. My attorney pulled in beside me 2 minutes later. We sat in our respective vehicles for a moment, then walked in together. The receptionist told us the Garfield conference room was on the 2nd floor. We took the stairs. I could see them through the glass wall before I opened the door. My son-in-law at the near side of the table, my daughter beside him, both in business clothes. Across from them, the heavy-set man, Harold Fitch, I'd learned, a property consultant with a spotty record in 2 counties, the title agent at the head of the table, a woman in her 40s who looked efficient and blameless, a man I didn't know at the far end, who I assumed was representing the buyer. I opened the door. My daughter saw me first. Her face did something complicated that I won't try to describe except to say it broke something in me. Even then, even knowing everything I knew, my son-in-law stood halfway up before he caught himself and settled back into his chair. "Mr. Carmichael," I addressed the title agent by the name on her nameplate. "This transaction needs to stop." I set my briefcase on the table and opened it. My attorney placed the trust documents in front of her first. "This property was transferred into an irrevocable living trust 6 weeks ago. Mr. he said, "My name is the sole trustee. Any power of attorney executed before or after that date has no authority over this property." Harold Fitch leaned forward. "The POA we have is Ford," I said. I placed the side-by-side signature comparison on the table, the analysis my attorney's handwriting consultant had prepared. The terminal letter of my surname rises at the wrong angle. The ink dating is inconsistent with the document date, and I have a notarized affidavit filed with this county 7 weeks ago, stating that I have never executed any power of attorney. The man from the buyer's side stood up. "You told me the documentation was clean." He was talking to Fitch. Fitch looked at my son-in-law. My son-in-law looked at my daughter. She was looking at me, not at the documents, at me, and I saw on her face something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not calculation, but a kind of relief. The way a person looks when they've been waiting for something terrible to stop and it finally does. I don't know what that means. I've thought about it many nights since. I don't think I'll ever entirely know. I placed the recordings on the table last. Not a phone, a transcript prepared by my attorney, time-stamped, with key passages highlighted. We need to move up the timeline. If he contests it, we have documentation of the decline. The title agent closed her folder. "I'm required to suspend this closing and report the circumstances to the state. I'd recommend everyone consult with counsel before saying anything further." The buyer's representative was already on his phone. I picked up my briefcase. My son-in-law said my name, first name. He'd never used my first name before. He said it like a question. I looked at him. "You forged my signature," I said. "You went through my private documents. You recorded fake evidence of cognitive decline to use against me." I paused. "The fact that your family made it worse, not better," my daughter said. "Dad." I looked at her for a moment. Then I walked out. In the elevator, my attorney said, "That was one of the most composed confrontations I've witnessed in 30 years of practice. I've done harder things," I said. And I had. The criminal referral went to the Greenville County DA's office within the week. Harold Fitch cooperated quickly, which surprised no one. My son-in-law was charged with forgery, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. My daughter, after considerable back and forth that I won't detail here because some of it still hurts too much, accepted a deferred prosecution agreement. She moved out. She's living with a friend in Colombia. We've spoken twice on the phone since. The conversations have been short and careful, like walking on ice that you're not sure will hold. My son-in-law entered a guilty plea in late summer. 3 years probation, substantial fines, a civil judgment that will follow him for a long time. I changed the locks the same afternoon as the closing, before I drove home. Suzette had a pot of coffee and a plate of shortbread on her front porch when I passed. Stopped the truck. We sat on her porch for an hour watching the light go long and gold over the fields and didn't talk much. She showed me pictures on her phone of her cat. I told her about the time my wife and I drove up to Brevard for a long weekend in October, and it rained the entire 4 days, and we played cards and ate soup, and I said it was the best vacation I could remember. Suzette said that sounded exactly right. I drove home after dark. The house was quiet. My house. The blue shutters still too bright, the driveway still cracked at the left edge where the oak root runs under it. The same creak in the hallway floor that I've been meaning to fix for a decade and probably won't. I made myself a bourbon and sat in the back room where my wife used to do her crosswords, and I let myself feel all of it. The grief of it, the anger of it, the relief of it. All three together the way feelings actually come, not separately the way people say they do. I'd spent 28 years making sure that what people did had consequences. I hadn't expected to spend my retirement proving that applied to my own family too. But I did. They tried to write me out of my own life. A bad idea under any circumstances. A considerably worse idea when the man you're trying to write out spent nearly 3 decades learning exactly how people get caught. I finished my bourbon. I washed the glass. I went to bed in my own house, under my own roof, and I slept better than I had in months.